Hi everyone. I'm going to give a talk about breaking the rules. I live in the United States. This is my first time in Poland. I'm really happy to be here. The content for this talk is inspired by my experience living in the United States, but it's about an idea that I believe is universal. So I'm excited to share it with you, hear about your experiences, and learn from the diverse perspectives in this room. To explain a little bit about who I am first, I have spent an inordinate amount of my adult life caring about the Python community. I'm a former director for the Python Software Foundation. I've been PyCon North America's diversity chair for the past couple of years. Back when I was living in Boston, I was an organizer for the Boston Python user group, and under that stewardship, it grew to become the largest Python user group in the world. I've also spent my entire adult life programming in Python. It's really the only language that I know, so it's important that this continue to be a successful language because I've invested in sort of being my career. So a couple of startups that were sort of oriented around Python. There was a company called Ksplice that had technology for rebootless kernel updates on Linux, but the client was written in Python. Zula was a real-time group collaboration service, sort of like Slack before Slack was Slack, which was a Django website. It was acquired by Dropbox, which is where I work today. I'm a director of engineering there. And Dropbox might be the largest Python distribution in the world. We have 500 million desktop client installs, and the sync engine that lives on your machine is written in Python. So like a very, very big use of Python. Guido works there. I see him every day. So Python is an important part of my life. But I have a secret to share with all of you, which is that all of this work, all of this effort, all of this community involvement was never actually about Python. I love you all, but it was never actually about Python. It was actually about systems. And that's what this talk is. So the rest of this talk is going to be a talk about systems. And what I mean by systems, particularly for programmers, is sort of rooted in a belief that I have, that I bet many of you also have, that learning how to program is a profound experience. Programming changes the way that you think about and debug and interact with the world. Because when you learn how to program, you learn a set of rules. You become fluent in those rules. You become a systematic debugger within those rules. You work with other people to break down and solve complex, important problems, to build software, to build libraries, to change the language and the ecosystem to make it better. So you learn these rules, and then you learn that you can change the environment. You learn that you can change the rules. So really, this experience of learning how to program is about mastering a system that you know that you can change. So you have this opportunity to experience mastering a system that you know that you can change. That's a pretty significant thing. And I think, there we go. We're back. And I think we're so used to sort of living and breathing this idea. Like there was a CPython sprint earlier in the conference. We make new libraries to solve new problems all the time. I think we forget sometimes where this idea comes from, because this isn't the way it used to be. There were like the bad old days 30 years ago where everything was closed source software. This kind of thing didn't happen. So where does this come from? And really, it comes from the tenets of free software. They give us the explicit permission to do this. So refresh your memory on what these tenets are. It's about the freedom to run a program as you wish for any purpose, to study how it works and to change it to make it better, to solve the problems you need to solve, to redistribute it so other people can benefit from your changes. So the tenets of free software are so baked into and integral to open source communities today that I think we sometimes take for granted what a powerful collective mindset it is to just embrace that this is something you can do, to expect it. And when we take it for granted, we can sometimes forget to challenge ourselves to carry this very powerful mindset into our lives outside of open source communities. So certainly programming has rules, and you can break the rules. But the truth is that a lot of things have rules, and sometimes they need breaking, right? Really, almost everything is a system with rules that you have the power to change, whether or not anybody tells you. And really, everything we're fighting for, pretty much, is a system, right? So certainly there are software systems, and that's mostly what we work on at conferences like this. But there are also hardware systems. And then, you know, the most important systems, I would argue, are people systems. And we shouldn't forget about these. Big systems with a lot of people in them. These systems, this is why I teach people to program. This is why I teach people to program. Like, this is why I invest so much of my time and my life into enabling other people to learn how to program inside and outside the Python community to foster an environment where this can happen. Because of this, right? Because programming changes the way that you think about and debug and interact with the world. And if you have this experience of mastering a system that you know that you can change, you know, it's in a very explicit version of this where we know that free software gives us this permission. Once you do this once, then maybe, hopefully, you believe that you can do it again. And we need as many people on the planet as possible to believe this about themselves, because there are a lot of systems that are really broken that need changing, and not enough people trying to change them. And the reality is that very rarely do we have the luxury or the comfort of the explicit permission that free software gives us. Nobody's ever going to invite us to change the systems that are most important. No one's ever going to tell us what the rules are, frankly. No one's going to tell us how to participate. No one's going to remind us that we have the power to debug the system and deconstruct it and change it and make it better. So it's important that we don't forget that we have that power. And we're lucky that we have this experience once in an environment like this. But it's important that we don't have that power, that we can generalize it, that we have the confidence to use it, and that we don't forget to share that power, and that we don't waste it. So at this point in the conversation, a lot of people have the following reaction, which is, can I have a concrete example, Jessica? Yes. So okay, there are these big, complicated broken systems that I care about. You might care about different things. Some things that I care about include, and it's going to sound big, right? Like, I care about, you know, poverty in the world. I care about democracy working well. I care about climate change. I care about a lot of things that are big and important. But I'm just a software engineer, right? These systems surely they're not changed by people like me, by people with my skills. You know, those types of problems are solved by politicians and governments, or they're solved by people dedicating their lives to scientific research or to community organizing. So, like, how does little old me fit into this narrative? And so first I'd like to challenge that framing, actually. So first, look around the room, there are a lot of us here, we are not just software engineers. We're not just open source developers. Like, what is this? The Python community was built from the ground up over decades by tens of thousands of people, working together to build the software and the community around the software, making it inclusive, making it accessible, making it a diverse global community. So we're not just software engineers. But okay, you want an example. Let's take a timely example, and this is something that I personally care about very deeply. And that is democracy as an institution in at least the United States, but preferably in a lot of places. Because there's some pretty freaky stuff going on right now where I live. But we're just software engineers, so what could we possibly contribute to this? And it's true that I'm probably not going to be a Supreme Court justice. I don't have a law degree. But many of us, and certainly the folks that I know in the US, many of us could, if we're serious about this, apply our skills, our software skills, directly to the challenge of making democracy work. In the United States, this could look like joining institutions like the US Digital Service, or the technology teams in local governments. And in Poland, or in whatever country you're visiting from, I'm sure there are analogous opportunities. Truly, many people in the Python community could utilize their community building expertise, because that's what this is, it's a community, it takes a lot of work to build, could utilize their community building expertise, driving democracy forward by serving in some kind of public office. When I think about my Python friends in the United States, I know that most of us could participate in get out the vote campaigns, or be poll workers who run the election voting stations, ensuring that everyone is able to vote and have their vote count on election day. Most people in our community have the privilege to put their time and their bodies in front of issues by protesting and amplifying the voices of people who aren't being heard. And certainly for everyone back at home, I hope that anybody who's eligible to vote, wherever they live, does vote. So yeah, we're a part of the system. Whether we like the system or not, we're a part of a community, and we have the power to change it in large and small ways if we choose to spend our time on it. So that's one example. And it's a lofty example, but it is an example that I care about. And although my perspective is that of someone from the United States, and what I'm passionate about might be different from what you're passionate about, there's certainly no shortage of important systems on this planet that need a lot of help. So, as you go through the remainder of this conference this weekend, I hope you've learned a bunch of interesting things. I hope you've met interesting people and old friends. But I also hope that with the rest of this great community, you talk about a system that's important to you, and how you are going to be an active participant in it and change it if it needs changing. So, don't forget that you have that power. Have the confidence to use it, don't forget to share it, and don't waste it. And that's my pitch to you. Thank you. Can I answer any questions? Does anyone want to talk about anything? Yes. Oh, yeah. Sure.
Are you confident that you change the world for the better by encouraging people to vote more rather than less? And why do you think democracy is a better system than the republic?
I think that democracy is the best form of government that we have figured out how to have. And I think history demonstrates that. I'm not sure if I understood the second half of your question.
I think they warned you about falling into democracy from that system. So I consider Republic superior. Okay, but maybe you and I should get a beer and like talk way on the political deep end on this. But I think the principle stands of being engaged with the system. You know, if you don't think that the current system is good, no one's going to change it. And like, who's going to change it if you don't? I guess is long and short. Yes. I think when you change the system, you have to make sure that you're actually proposing something better. Otherwise, you're just doing a revolution. It's not a good idea.
Sure, you should believe that what you're doing makes the system better. It's a friendly amendment to the statement, yeah.
Okay, so there is a question from the internet. So
from the internet, great.
So speaking of the system, have you thought about anyone involved in lawmaking about version control?
That's actually a really serious thing. Actually, like a bunch of the primitives that we take for granted, like desperately need to be adopted by other domains. And this is true about like the ability to easily diff legislation and government. This is also true when we talk about like versioning and reproducible research in the sciences. Like the fact that it's hard to share and track like important information and important data in these domains in government or in the sciences is actually a huge problem. There's an organization called software on the science side. There's an organization called Software Carpentry, that teaches like software engineering fundamentals to scientists to help them with reproducible research. So it teaches things like version control, like how to write maintainable scripts. They don't have to be beautiful, but hopefully maintainable, and things like that to help move the scientists forward on being able to share their research effectively and have it be reproducible. I mean, the same thing is true for government. Like, yes, amen, we should be able to diff our laws easily. Absolutely. Looks like it's a great time, right? Like, this stuff all comes together. A lot of the primitives that we take for granted just don't exist in other domains, and that's a tragedy. Other questions from the internet? Or here? Am I? Yeah, okay.
Could you tell us something more about this digital government initiative? How it works?
Why didn't hear you? So you get to I can come up there. Alright, we're going. It's like my Oprah moment. Let's do it.
So that everyone can hear it. Could you tell us something more about this digital government initiative?
Yeah. Okay, and a lot of things are super screwed up about the US government, definitely true, but the US digital service that I mentioned is a really interesting recent innovation and a bright spot. So in the last couple of years, the necessary people, and this required a lot of support from the president actually, sort of cleared the way to be able to bring in mostly software, like software and operations expertise from industry, compensate them competitively while working in government, and give them a lot of air cover to just like go in and find inefficient systems and make them better. And this is being applied in a bunch of explicit, like a bunch of, there are specific projects up front, like, like one horrible problem has been a backlog of claims processing for veterans in the United States, which is like a ridiculous thing to even have to say out loud, that we can't like get medical care for veterans, but it's because the technology pipeline for processing these things is so encumbered and out of date that like you just can't use the current system to process things fast enough to get through the backlog. And so they have like this tiger team of really great software engineers from industry who come in and bring in the expertise and have a lot of air cover to make this, to overhaul the system and make it maintainable, and hopefully to use things like open source software that are cheaper, but often like easier to maintain going forward. And this is sort of a grand experiment. Like this is new in the last couple of years to have this model where you're able to bring in people from outside, hire them quickly, compensate them appropriately, and give them a lot of space to just solve really complex software problems. My hope is that we don't totally destroy this by electing an insane person who dismantles it, but if it lives on, I'm hopeful that this will continue to sort of up-level and bring a lot of software best practices into government where it's desperately needed.
Okay, so we have more questions here. So, Edward Snowden said to get rid of the robots. What is democracy without privacy?
Yeah, so and I have to know a little bit more context on the Dropbox quote, but I certainly agree with the second sentence, which is that privacy is important, and the way that we trade that off for security is a very careful thing for us to act on in an informed way. Yeah, I'm sorry, I really don't know the context for the quote. Dropbox actually has we try to be really transparent about our relationship with the government and the types of, certainly our security policies and the types of requests that we get for user information. I don't want to misquote anything, but you can, if you like Google for Dropbox, privacy, Dropbox security, like we publish transparency reports, which I would encourage you all to check out.
So what would you say is the biggest problem we should be trying to fix with the technological means?
It's hard to stack rank them. Okay, I'm going to answer by way of a story. So a couple of weeks ago, I was in Tokyo for a PyCon conference, which is the only reason I ever traveled. And in Tokyo, they have an innovation museum. And my takeaway from the Innovation Museum is that, and this is like a museum for children and adults, but my takeaway from the Innovation Museum is we're all going to die. Like, I think that's what they wanted me to take away. They had these simulations, like, where you had to try to prevent climate change from happening, and then you would definitely fail, and then you would get letters from the future, like telling you how terrible the future is, which I think is supposed to scare the shit out of the kids and make them care about climate change. And it was like effective for me too. I would say climate change we need to get a handle on, and it's hard to stack rank. There are many things that need to be worked on in the world. But there's one anecdote for you about one major challenge that we need to step up and solve together.
Okay, so is there anything that would change in the world if more people were into IT industry? For example, do you expect technical progress to limit the poverty?
Oh yeah, great question. And I think that this is similar to the conversation earlier about government, which is that like technology is going to back a bunch of this stuff. Like if you implement any program that affects people at scale, there are probably apps involved. There's probably a website involved. There's probably the security of user data involved. So because I'm a nerd, the US Census, which is how we count everyone in the US every 10 years, has a 300-page operating manual that I read once because I was curious. And like the technology problems in conducting the census are insane. Like you have to find every person in the US and you have to ask them in the right way for the demographic data, and you have to warehouse it without getting hacked, and you have to process the data in a productive way. Like there's technology behind every piece of that. And we need the best people working on these problems to get the best answers. So the answer is like, yes, we absolutely need more people in IT, and we need people in IT willing to do like the grungy but important work that is in the public interest. There are not enough people who are doing that today, and some of that's because it's like the compensation incentives are hard, and we need to figure out a way to fix that.
Okay, so change, complexity, rewrite. How do you deal with throwing out systems at Dropbox?
Oh boy, we're not that good at, well, okay, so rewrites are often, rewrites are rarely the right answer. Sometimes they are, but mostly they aren't. Dropbox has evolved a lot of our big projects over time. We do have one interesting rewrite underway right now, which is that we're actually rewriting the core sync engine in Rust. And that will be a very interesting, very careful, like very large, complicated project, because the sync engine is the thing that, like, that's what syncs and stores all of your files. That has to be right 100% of the time. You can never lose your stuff. Like, we can never have like access problems to your data. So that is a rewrite that is happening because we've done the analysis. We think it's the right thing to do, but we have to be exceedingly careful about it and kind of validate it. But how do you deal with throwing out systems? I think the answer is like you probably shouldn't throw the system out if it's sufficiently complex and has sufficient baggage. You should be thoughtful about evolving it, but sometimes you do have to throw it out, and if that's true, like have very strong testing and validation plans for it. But that's like a really big question. We can talk about that for 2 hours.
Okay, so another Dropbox question.
Yeah.
Does the Dropbox get anything interesting out of the files stored on its servers?
So we don't. I mean, it's encrypted. Like our stuff is encrypted at rest, so we don't look at anything in your files. So no, we don't learn anything interesting about you. It's your stuff. We don't look at it.
Okay, so what do you think about demarchy or sortition? A random sample of citizens could give better representation of a populace than voting?
I think we're getting a little into the political philosophy deep end, and we should talk over board games later today. I don't want to let's bring it back to the conference a little bit, if that's okay. But come find me, we'll talk about it. Do you want me to answer this one?
Yeah, sure. So does women programmers meet with bullying or something like that in the USA?
Good question. So how should I answer this? So bullying is a very, that's a very strong word. I mean, I don't think I have ever been bullied, although my experience is the only one that I've had. I can't speak for other folks. I think that
the answer is yes.
Well,
the answer is yes. For example, is Jessica Frizzell.
A very good answer is yes. Jessica Frizzell, she's very known in the Go community. I think there is a blog post from her describing what problems and what kind of emails she was getting from mostly men's working, which is very sad and should totally not happen, but unfortunately it is true. And this is one of the things that Python community is working hard to solve, actually.
well, yeah, and I think so. Okay, so sorry. Well, so, and I think a way of talking about and framing this question is, like, what does it mean to have a good open source community? Yeah? And there are a bunch of things that go into that, right? So, so I'm the diversity chair for PyCon North America, and a lot of people ask me how we get lots of women to come speak at that conference. 40% of speakers last year were women. And it starts with building a community. So you have to prove to yourself that you've built an inclusive community that is welcoming and projects itself as welcoming to people of diverse backgrounds. It needs to be accessible, and accessible means a bunch of things. Like, people with like varying abilities need to be able to attend the conference. Different financial levels need people to attend the conference. People who have kids maybe need to have facilities in place to be able to attend the conference. And then you also have to talk about things that are interesting to a broad range of people. Like, we have a lot of stuff going on in the Python community, so being thoughtful about what a broad and inclusive set of topics for conferences is. Yeah, so I think that the Python community is often at the forefront of experiments on how to produce inclusive environments. That we'll trade off maybe this first. Yeah. Running experiments on how to produce inclusive environments that attract and retain diverse folks. I mean, it's a big question. The one other thing that I would highlight is that, and actually, if you think about this as a system, as per the talk, it's really important to develop these programs and systems that are sustainable. So figuring out a sustainable set of outreach mechanisms for communities that will persist even if one organizer leaves, that are streamlined to be able to continue doing year over year are important. So community building takes constant effort, and you should treat it as a system that should be a sustainable one.
Okay, any recommendation for software engineers interested in getting into the government domain? Where to start? Who to talk to?
So I can answer this question for the US. I don't know that I can answer it in a general way that would also apply to folks from other countries. So programs like the US Digital Service are a great option in the US. Local governments are also increasingly hiring CIOs to just own the problem of how a local government uses technology, and those would be great entry points. There are also open source software projects that are used by governments, and you can contribute to those projects. Like the way, you would never want every government to be rebuilding on its own a way to share data in a transparent fashion, like their website. We should be reusing components for this, and there are open source projects that one can contribute to that help make this easier.
you support gender diversity programs like
You can just, yeah.
So you support gender diversity programs like PyLadies, but aren't they perceived negatively, like showing the girls need special care instead of equality?
Sure. And so I would asterisk this question by saying that, like, this isn't an abstract idea. Like, why do we care about diversity? And it's not just gender diversity. It's important, like, to make the best possible product. In our case, our product is the programming language and community. The people who are contributing to it and the community around it need to reflect the diversity of the people who use the language, the software, the community. So, and that's proven by science. Like, much research has been done on this. So, like, diverse teams produce better results, and that's really, like, that is one element of this. And I think there's also, you know, going back to just like the value of learning how to program, I think it behooves us to encourage as many people as possible to be able to learn how to program, and this is a good community for doing so. As for if it's perceived negatively or not, there might be some cultural differences here. I think in the US it's largely considered a positive thing. I think these types of communities that focus on a particular demographic are often important and add a lot of value and are necessary, but often aren't necessary forever. Because, like, once, like, the general environment becomes just, you know, very inclusive over time, like the things that people are getting out of these special communities that they aren't getting out of the main one, those differences go away over time. So, one way to think about this is there's a lot of, people get value out of it, and if they get value out of it, like, great, I encourage that. But also, for some people, it is a temporary mechanism until that value is represented in the main community.
If privacy is so important for Dropbox, why not implement zero-knowledge end-to-end encryption?
Well, so I can't go off into the technical deep end on this, but there's a trade-off for us in the experience that we're able to provide for our users, and we have chosen a security model that is aligned with what our users want and delivers the most value for them. And folks can, you know, Dropbox is very popular, a lot of companies use it. If our security and privacy model isn't for you, then don't use it, that's fine.
So what is most difficult for you to improve in the system?
I think I need more detail on this question to answer it. Like, for me personally, what is the thing that I want to improve and what has been difficult about it? Oh, what? Okay, fine.
Alright, so do you believe that every human should learn how to program, even if it meant spending extra hours at schools?
I mean, every human on the planet is maybe a strong stance on this, but I think that I think it'd be great for a lot of people, or most people, or eventually all people, to have the opportunity to learn how to program. I don't think that everyone has to become a programmer, but you know, I think it's a pretty like that type of computational thinking is a pretty transformative experience, and I do think it's important. As important as subjects that are required today to have that exposure at some point in one's academic career. I suspect that in the United States, at least, some sort of programming or computational thinking class will become required in the next maybe 10 years. If you think about the other required classes, your math classes, your chemistry, your physics, and your biology classes, it would be great if there were infinity time and we could sample every academic domain, but I think there's a very strong case about the value of programming, computational thinking, and also just an awareness about like what it means to be a digital citizen and how to behave effectively and safely in like the digital world that we live in today. Yeah, we'll go forever. Yeah, let's keep all these.
is more like a suggestion. So could you post? It might be an interest for some of you in Poland. So yeah, the next question. What if the system you want to change is closed? Change the system? What are the variables?
I want to make sure I understand the question. Okay, I'm not sure I understand the question, but certainly with the parenthetical, I think that it's important and maybe even a moral imperative or obligation for folks with privilege to give space and amplification to voices that have less privilege, and making sure that those voices are heard. So I'm talking to you all. We're relatively privileged on this planet, so we should make sure that we're active participants in amplifying the voices of people who aren't being heard.
All right, so thank you for the talk, Jessica McKellar.